Well, I do think it is kind of a nice place to start, just to tell us a little bit about who you are, what your ministry is, where you find yourself these days.
So my name is Rick Riccioli. I'm a Franciscan friar, a conventual Franciscan friar. Around these parts, people think I'm a CFR, Franciscan of the Renewal, but no, we're the Grey Friars, which is one of the original three branches of the order, possibly the original group that everybody else reformed. We were the lax friars in convents, and so that's why they called us conventuals, right? I've been a friar like 42 years, a priest 34, 35 years. Um, I'm originally from Montreal in Quebec, Canada. Uh, Joined the order there, served in Toronto as a formation director, vocation director, did some marketing for fundraising for the order, publishing, and then got a degree in counseling, ended up in Toronto working in a parish. And that's where kind of I realized something had to be done differently because the parish was declining. A great parish, but it was World Youth Day in Toronto, and I was like, okay, how do we do this differently? So since then, I've gone on to, after the parish there, did young adult ministry in Syracuse, New York, with a volunteer group called Francis Corps, like Peace Corps but Franciscan. Then the place where I was, the parish kind of went broke, so they asked me to be pastor as well. Um, and then finished there and came here to Brooklyn. I've been in Brooklyn 2 years now at Most Holy Trinity St. Mary's Parish, which is a merged parish in Williamsburg.
That's really
Great.
cool, Rick. By the way, I was at that World Youth Day in Toronto.
Were you?
Remember that? Yeah, yeah.
Did you visit the Vocations Pavilion at all?
I probably did. I probably did.
So
Yeah.
that was, I would say that was probably a minor miracle in the history of the church, because all of the Franciscans, what do they say? There's three things the Pope doesn't know: where the Franciscans get their money, what's really happening in the Jesuits' mind, and how many different types of Franciscan sisters there are. Anyway, um, the pavilion was the first time the Franciscan friars, sisters, all the Franciscans, we had one booth together.
Wow,
We worked collaboratively together. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. Yeah,
that's really cool.
yeah,
That is really, really cool.
yeah.
So good to hear.
Is Francis course still going? Is that something that's still happening?
It is, and we used to be both in Costa Rica and in Syracuse. We closed down the Costa Rica part for a variety of reasons. They usually have about 8 volunteers in Syracuse, and they work with underprivileged people in the community. Syracuse is a wonderful, wonderful city. It's got its challenges, but there's a lot of young adult energy there, people trying to make a difference. They have an amazing mayor who's really doing great work, and a lot of good people. And so yeah, we welcome people, and it's not just about the service. In fact, we position ourselves as being a faith formation program. You do Francis Court to grow, to try to live the gospel for a year more intentionally and more intensely. And you grow as a person, you grow in service, you grow in your faith. We get a lot, nowadays we started off, we were getting a lot of kids from kind of the Catholic legacy schools, and they were kind of more social justice oriented. The faith part was like, you had to pull teeth. Now we tend to get kids coming from more traditional Catholic schools and Catholic environments who might be a little bit rigid. And when they come to us, they kind of mellow out. They're like, oh, Catholicism is a bit broader than I was taught. And there's a little bit more diversity in the Catholic Church. And my faith isn't just something that I say, it's got to be something that I live and do. And especially in community, right? When you're 6, 7, 8 people living in community, sharing decision making, it's a big learning curve for a lot of them. But it makes an amazing difference in their lives.
It
Mm.
sounds like an actually healthy reality show in some ways.
Oh, absolutely. You could, if you had cameras in there, and it would be great. But I had one of the kids. I call them kids. I shouldn't, because they're 21 to 25. One of the volunteers' parents called me up one day after her daughter came home. She said, "What did you do to my daughter?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "We came home. My husband and I came home from work, and she had cleaned the house and she had made dinner." And she's never done that before for us. And she said, I asked my daughter what's going on. She says, well, we're a community and I'm part of the community. I got to do my part. So it was like, okay, with
Wow.
success, we've been successful. She got it.
That's awesome. You mentioned like there's these social justice warriors type of people that are, that's I think that's somewhat common for younger generations these days. Younger people coming out of that, and I've met people who, let's say, work at a soup kitchen full time, or are volunteering there all the time, who have no time for the church, who never want to step foot in a church again. Even though maybe the soup kitchen is is a Catholic soup kitchen or something like that. And so that clearly that person's had a bad experience, but this is not uncommon either. And both of these sides are they're it's one side of the coin and not the other. But at this but not really. I mean, like they'll say it, but like when you live the corporal works of mercy, you are being Christ in the world, even if you kind of refuse to go to mass or something like that. Like, what do you think is the connection point between the two that clearly Francis Core is able to do, like you said, like when people were less like believing the things but wanted to do the service, it met them there. When people are ready to, and then vice versa. So what do you think that connection point is?
You know, I don't know. It was really difficult when people were coming for the social work, but were not really warming up to the church. And doing retreats with them, sometimes trying to get them to open up. I remember, I mean, it required bottles of scotch. I mean, afterward, it's like, dude, I can't do this. Like, I can't. It's like pulling teeth, right?
Mm.
I think what was really important for them is to have an experience of church that's real, truly Catholic, and truly human. And I think for Franciscans that works well for us. It's kind of part of our shtick. A church that is humble, that is listening to them, listening to where they're at, and maybe challenge them to grow in little steps, right? In baby steps, and not pushing away from questioning. Like they'd come to me sometimes to talk, and they say, I have some doubts, I have questions. I said, you're a 22-year-old young woman. You should have questions. You should be questioning things. You should be wondering. You should be struggling with this. It makes you wouldn't have a brain. And the church is not against brains. We are the church of science and of reason and of philosophy. Like this is what we do. So yeah, go ahead. Don't assume you know the church's full position just because you heard some things, but go ahead and question. So I think that helped. Um, I saw it also the parish where I was working eventually in Syracuse. We have a food pantry and a soup kitchen, a health center, social services, a lot of stuff with that community, the north side of Syracuse. And there again, we had a lot of volunteers who would come and who were either very devoted to the church or marginally attached to the church, but they liked what we do. So for them, again, it was, it's like evangelization. It's getting to meet the friars and the sisters and seeing the church as normal and not judging them and accepting them and gratitude for what they do, and acknowledging what they do. I think that to me, that's kind of at the human level, being available for relationship is the bridge that connects us,
Do you have any personal stories or examples you could share that come to mind? I mean, I know that's probably hard to pull, but I
Well,
mean,
in all those ministries, I mean, I remember we had one guy who um, was coming very faithfully, and his wife wouldn't come to it. She wanted to, but she didn't feel welcome in the church until we started having some events where she got to meet me and we talked about church issues, right? And she was like, "Oh, I didn't expect that you would be so open to my perspective." And it got her to be involved in one of our ministries. And then later on in time, they started coming to church together, right? Now we kind of had a bit of a kerfuffle over COVID, but which happens. Um, but yeah, there have been a lot of examples of people who step by step come back, right? Um, One of the things we did there I don't think they're still doing it because it's a lot of work and a lot of creativity. Is we created a I don't know, do you want me to go into this, Dave? This whole 1111 thing?
Sure.
We're in a really poor Syracuse. We were a really poor neighborhood, and there was across the street near us. There was an evangelical church that decided to put up a community center to evangelize. And I was like, we've been here 175 years doing this work, grinding it out with these people, and you're not going to come and evangelize? Like hell no! Like we can do evangelization. So we had a grotto church under our church that was kind of basically underused. So we cheaply remodeled it and set up a non-mass Sunday service called 1111, just because. Um, and it was a liturgy of the word, basically, led by our director of evangelization, a layman. And he was covered in tattoos. And we had this guy playing, and it was bring your coffee, and the theory behind it is come for coffee, stay for supper. And the pathway was through Alpha and eventually the Lord's Supper, basically. But creating a place for people who are not ready to come to church to begin to connect with us. The church in Syracuse is a huge, very ornate, old German Baroque church. And the liturgy kind of reflects that a little bit. So to come into that as off the street, it's a little bit off-putting, it could be. So people coming in and have a coffee, there's an espresso bar, like they don't expect that from Catholics. And so we saw people coming back who knew us, were involved with us, but never dared to come in the church. And also this was both the exciting part and the difficult part. People who were patrons of our pantry and soup kitchen started coming and feeling like they had a place to go, which kind of was because sometimes they're stinky and sometimes they're awkward. Like, how do we integrate them and how do we deal with that with the other people who are coming? So, yeah, it was very challenging, very challenging.
Wow, that's really good work, though. I mean, just thinking too, Rick, like, and I know this can be a little controversial, but like, how much when we're talking about accompaniment, let's say that idea, which is such a Pope Francis word, or just kind of meeting people where they are, and then the idea of challenging them, like, how do you go about that personally? Like, sometimes I get leery even when talking about it because it's like, all right, I'm going to meet you where you are, and then I'm going to take you where I want you to go. Right? There's that temptation.
Yes.
Like I know what is going to make you happy, and so I'm going to meet you where you are. I'm going to walk with you, but I'm going to hold your hand and pull you where I want you to go. And like that becomes that can be sniffed out very quickly by certain people, right?
Mhm.
Like, so how much of like a card carrying Catholic are you looking for a person to become once they have encountered, let's just say, you or the ministry that you find yourself in? How do you navigate that? Do you have an idea of what you think this looks like? I mean, I know it's a case by case situation. It's one every person's different. I get that, but like, how do you approach that just in general?
That we struggled with that a lot as a team. So the other thing that was very helpful to me in doing this was Divine Renovation, that
Hmm.
program at Halifax with James Mallon, and the coaching to help kind of imagine what is the vision, what are we going, what's the game plan for these people, what's the critical path, and it goes back to Pope Francis, right? Everyone is welcome, todos, todos, todos. Everyone is welcome, and it's a field hospital, so you don't have to be perfect. But we do want to be on the path of healing. We do want to be on the path of growth. But my next step is not your next step, right? I may have a hope that you'll come and do Alpha and start leading Alpha, and then if you're not Christian, do the OCIA and be baptized and be the pastoral council president and be the biggest donor for the parish. I mean that's a lovely, you know, I can't lie. That's part of what I hope will happen.
Hmm.
But as a man of faith, as a servant, I'm here to minister to people where they're at. So uh, yeah, it's tough to say, okay, what's this person's next step, and do we really mean it that they're welcome? even if they're not totally there yet. So, for example, okay, um, I'll talk about a gay couple we had in our community who got married, and their wedding was obviously not both Catholic, and their wedding was not a Catholic wedding, but it centered around the gospel, and it was all gospel themed, and it was absolutely beautiful wedding. I went in civilian clothes because I was a friend. I was not their minister; I was a friend, um, and talking with them, and they start talking about children, and I'm like, like it's hard for us to for people who feel disenfranchised from the church for us to then go and tell them what to do,
Hmm.
but to have conversations about, okay, what's the church's vision? Why is the church teaching this about children? Why is this important? And helping them make a decision for their own future and their children's future that is perhaps most in line with what I think the gospel is calling us to. Um, People who are, I had parishioners in Syracuse, this kid who was identifying as trans. I mean, it was a little child, and I was like, oh, struggling with it. The grandparents were really, they're like, Friar, what do we do? I said, well, first of all, we just accept him, her as they are, right? At the same time, we got to be honest with him and say, like, it's okay to be you. You don't at 10 years old have to start putting labels on yourself right away. Allow yourself just to be you. And you are welcome as you are, and you can come as you are. We're not gonna judge. Um, so those are the practical situations where it's like just being fraternal and being kind and inviting them to act, to reflect what is God calling them next, right? Because it's especially people who are on the margins, they're the path to holiness is no different than anybody else's. It's about listening to the word of God, sharing the sacraments, um, being attentive to the Holy Spirit, having an open heart. And who knows how they get moved to the next step. But John, like you said, I mean, if I can't just drag them,
Yeah.
you know.
It's difficult because like I've had to humbly accept the fact that like yeah, one of the disadvantages, let's just say, of living in a church that has such a strong tradition and has done so much painstaking work to really analyze situations so well to really lay down a foundation of what a life well lived looks like, let's just say, or what we as a community ought to look like on the societal level, on the ecclesial level. uh, in a certain way, it becomes a problem because it's it doesn't allow me to fully be open to what the spirit is actually doing in the person, because I'm constantly measuring it up to what this prescription looks like for the person's life, for their participation in community, and how that's supposed to kind of just look on paper. and
Yeah.
and and, and and for me, it's like I have to like let that go, not because I'm trying to make a statement saying like, oh, I think the church has to kind of do away with all these prescription models or change teachings. Like I don't have any desire to be changing church's teachings, but I also don't feel as if I have to keep a person bound by them in a certain sense, just because I have to see what is the spirit doing, and I have to be surprised by that and be open to that, and to realize like it's just not up to me to make sure this person conforms to something that's at the end of the day a very abstract concept. I mean, I've my one friend has said this to me, like, God will reveal his love to you by any means necessary. And that's a very powerful thing to say, because then at that point, all the prescriptions are helpful, but they aren't necessarily the cure, you know? I
You're
don't know.
sounding like somebody very popular. Pope Francis. Like, I mean, the man, people get, it freaks me out because people get so uptight with him. And it's like, the man's a Jesuit. And we Franciscans have a rivalry with the Jesuits, but the Jesuits are really smart people and they're really good at what they do. And he is really good at what he does. Like he's saying, yes, the transcendental kind of visionary goals are correct. The church has a vision for us and it's revealed from Christ and what will make us happy ultimately. And I have to deal with the reality of this person in flesh and blood in front of me. How do I acknowledge Christ's presence in them? How do I revere them? How do I recognize who they are, and then assist them? But it's you have to be able to do both at the same time, and that's the tricky part, right? It's acknowledging that yes, our truth, there is absolute truth, and we have Christ's revelation, but we may not always be the perfect vehicles for interpreting that revelation in this present moment. We have to be humble enough to say, I don't have all the answers, right? And and I think for me, for as a Franciscan, Francis' approach is always about humility, service, kinship. He calls it brotherhood, but that this is not somebody I'm a stranger I'm ministering to. This is my sister, my brother, right? And so, and you talk to Catholics like that, even more traditional Catholics or more uptight Catholics. Sometimes you'll say, if this was your family member, what would you do? Well, blood is blood. You got to love them. Even if you don't agree, you kind of love them and hope for the best. Well, in the same way, I think you as Catholics, we love one another no matter what, and we still work on the other issues, but it's got to come from a place of absolute unconditional acceptance and love first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think that, so you have kind of how you've worked this out for yourself, but it's a different thing to lead a parish through this type of thinking, right? Like it's far different. And so how do parishes practically approach that tension between, someone's personal identity and authenticity of who they are and, your desire to form them in the teaching of the church, to evangelize them with the Holy Spirit? How do you meet that tension?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, because every place is a little bit different. My community in Syracuse was quite small, old German stock, but you know, whenever a young family would come to mass at Assumption in Syracuse, everybody'd be like, oh my God, there's young people here. We all get excited. And there was one weekend I remember this kid was crying a lot. And I'm like, oh, I could just see all the old people are going to start getting cranky and, do all this stuff that makes it not very welcoming. And before I knew it, um, the reverse happened, actually. All the grandparents around the kid started taking the kid in their arms and we're soothing it and letting the parents go up for communion. And it was like, oh my God, this is working. Like they get it, right?
Mm.
It's not about we're grateful there's a young couple in our parish, and we're going to help you because we know how difficult it is, right? Um, Here in Trinity in Williamsburg, I'm still getting to know the community. Um, I gotta say that, bigger parishes, sometimes you end up with a lot more gossip and judgment, what this person's wearing, do you know what this person did on the weekend? And it's like, shut up. And like,
Mm.
that's hard. And so I'm honest, like part of the divine innovation thing is casting a vision, right? Like getting people to know where we need to go and what's the vision for the future. And so reminding people, if we want to be radically welcoming, we can't sit and judge people, and we can't um, kind of alienate them when they come into our midst. Um, but that takes formation, and David, you and I have talked about that, right? Like it's how do you form the parish to have that mindset, to become missionary disciples, as the buzzword is now. But it's basically just be nice to people when they come to church. And it's not about you. We're going through a rehab of our how we do hospitality, and people are sort of ingrained in, well, this is my role as hospitality minister and greeter versus this. It's like we all need to be a bit more flexible so that we can do what's best for the people coming to visit us. It's not about my role, my position, my status. Um, you know.
So
Well,
you're doing things. So you're talking about, a posture towards of belonging towards people who are coming into church, but you're also doing activities that are designed to welcome new people in church, hopefully, right? So you guys are running Alpha. Can you talk a little
Yeah,
bit about those types of activities?
so Alpha was a program I first saw in Toronto. I really didn't like it. If you haven't figured out, I'm a little bit more in the middle kind of the spectrum of the church. I found Alpha a little conservative and a little too charismatic. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Um, and then when I got to Syracuse, I got a little bit more desperate than I was in Toronto. I'm like, okay, I'll try anything. And then I looked at Alpha again, and they had like done this film series which was absolutely stunningly beautiful. And we started it in Syracuse. They say it takes about 5 seasons of alpha before you start getting results. It's hard. It's hard because you
Results being
start seeing numbers of people coming and joining and being affected by it.
Mhm.
Right. It takes a while because you're creating a culture, and that's key, right? It's a culture of hospitality and of evangelization. Alpha is not, it's not like renew, where you do renew and you're done, or you do this Bible study and you're done. Alpha is a way of life of hospitality. So for both the parishioners to get it and for your team to really be fine-tuned, it takes a while. And for people to get the word out that it's a good place to go. So basically we started welcoming people, and it's, if you've not heard of Alpha, it comes out of the Episcopal Church in England. It's very basic. It's just the charisma, just introduction to Jesus Christ, right? It does still have a bit of a charismatic overtone, but you can downplay that if you want. And there's ways of making it a little bit more Catholic, but it's just meeting Jesus, right? And it's over a meal. So you invite people to a nice meal, a place where they can just ask questions about the meaning of life. Like, I have my car, I've got my condo, got my job, things are going well. Now what? Like, what's the point of my life? Right. So those questions, like we're helping people tackle that. And they have these. So after dinner, you watch a video, and some of them, they always make me cry. I mean, they're really powerful. And then you have conversation. And the point of it is you don't try to convince people. You let the video do its thing, and you let the table conversation do its thing. You don't. If somebody says, "Well, I don't like the Catholic Church because it's too rich," that's not the time to dispute that or argue. Let them say what they need to say. Let in this sense, let the Holy Spirit do its work. And it goes over 10 sessions, and then there's a retreat. So we've done that here. We did a big Spanish one, did some English one, I did a smaller English one. Now we're in a bit of a pause for a variety of reasons. We had to pause it. Um, and we're going to start up in January with a youth version. So they do alpha for youth, for young adults, and there's alpha for jail, alpha for marriage, different things you can use that way. Um, and the other thing we've been trying to do is using arts and media to meet our neighborhood, our neighbors, right? So we've been having concert series, um, really, really fleshing out the blessing of animals for St. Francis Day. Um, Again, it's just the marketing is really the big thing, like creating an opportunity for people to come, and then so that when they come, they can meet who you really are, as opposed to who they think you are.
Do you think these activities help to define your role as the pastor and the laity's role as whatever you see their role as better, in their own minds, maybe? How do you look at that?
Yes and no. Ideally, it should, but I got to say, I'm probably doing it wrong most of the time, in the sense that um, I'm as a pastor, my role, really the way I see my role, is to nurture and feed and invest in my key ministers. So I have a small team of leadership, and my goal is to really empower them to do this stuff. And I'm doing that to a great degree. But sometimes I get itchy, and I start going into the trenches and start moving things along if it's not going fast enough for me,
Mhm.
which has backfired. right? So this
Mm.
summer I did Alpha because we had some people who wanted to join the OCIA. There was nothing happening in the summer. I'm like, I can't just leave people hanging, right? So let's do Alpha. Well, when you do by yourself and you're putting all the energy in it as a priest, it's not gonna work, right? There's no team. And
Plus, you send the signal, we don't, you're not needed here. This is something for the clergy to do or something like that.
exactly. And so I'm regretting that. And that's one of my temptations. I like things done yesterday. I like things done well, and the only one who's going to do it well is me, right? So
Mm.
I'm like, ugh, no, 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 no. I can't do that. It's first of all, it's exhausting. Secondly, it does not change the culture of the parish. They do not assume, and my divine renovation coach taught me this because there was a funny story about this lady who used to do flowers for us in Syracuse. And I asked her to do some arrangements. And she did beautiful arrangements. But right next to the arrangement she made, there were dead flowers. So why didn't you take the flowers out? Because we didn't tell me to. So I would tell my coach that. He goes, what does that tell you? You have not empowered her to have responsibility, her own sense of responsibility for her ministry. She's just doing what you want her to do to help you.
Hmm.
And so that shift for me has been right? Allowing people just to take over and it's not like, okay, go wild. I mean, I still need to form them and support them and encourage them. But I have to like let go a lot. And so that's going to be the challenge with evangelization in the church. Because if you look at all the documents, us friars, we just had a meeting about this the other day from Paul the Sixth to John Paul II to Benedict to Francis. It all talks about it's the ladies' responsibility. They they need to be the people doing it, and we need to be the fuel that propels them, as opposed to the people being the fuel that enables the parish to do the work. The lay people need to be the ones who are actively engaging their neighbors.
And that's something that kind of goes beyond the ideological spectrum because, I've been uh, in conservative places where it's very heavily priest-centric and, father just tells everyone what to do and they just kind of are obedient sheep, so to speak. But I've been in progressive communities too, where it's almost the same thing. They're all waiting for the priest to kind of make decisions. I'm like thinking, it's so interesting how even personal, let's say, dispositions don't break down the clerical hold that somehow still exists in so many parish communities uh, across the theological or ecclesial spectrum. That's what I want to say. Um, the thing I want to get to some nuts and bolts issues because I know the Diocese of Brooklyn pretty well. I mean, but really, the Diocese of Brooklyn is very much like any other type of like older urban diocese where you got lots of churches that were built during a certain time of a lot of ethnic groups, immigrants coming and starting their own church communities and whatnot. So you have a massive infrastructure you're trying to work with, and you still have a pretty strong remnant at this point of people who've been in parishes their entire life. They're now in their 70s, 80s. They still are faithfully coming. They're still contributing, at least financially, to the church. Uh, and they sometimes have a strong hold on what you can do ministerially when you're trying to kind of also be very aware that the demographics are changing. So that's one thing I wanted to kind of just bring up with you is like, how do you do that? Now, there's some creative stories I've heard of. In fact, the most documented stories is based out here in San Francisco at Most Holy Redeemer, which was a parish that had a big Polish population traditionally throughout much of the early 20th century. And then it's in the Castro section, which became by the 1960s a very big gay community. And you had these elderly women who were Polish, who were losing their husbands, who were dying. And then in the AIDS crisis, you had so many people affected by that. And it was a remarkable story of both these elderly women befriending men who lost their partners from AIDS, and that was one way of trying to bring these two different groups from two different time periods of the parish together. Now that's a pretty remarkable story, and I'm sure there's other examples of things comparable to that, but just on a more practical day-to-day experience that you have, do you see the challenge, and how do you address that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, you captured the diocese pretty well, I think. There might be a little bit more youthfulness than you might expect.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we have a legacy infrastructure that we have to maintain. Um, our insurance bill this month is 190, not this month, this year, but it came in this month. It was 190,000 for the year.
Hmm.
I'm just not used to that. This is New York City, but I'm like, it takes my breath away every time I see that. Like $190,000 for insurance. Wow. Okay. We have a lot of buildings. Now, we're also blessed that several of these buildings are producing a lot of income for us. So
Hmm.
it's going to work. And I'm grateful to the diocese for helping us with that. So there's a lot of stuff I'm maintaining and maintaining the vibrancy of the community. We have a Polish community too, and they have their customs and stuff. How do you do that? Um, for me, it comes down to, and you hear this in confession, right? It's like the biggest anxiety, the biggest worry a lot of these people have they been successful in transmitting the faith to their children? And it breaks their hearts. So if you can say to them, I have an idea of how we can maybe help bring young people back to the faith, they'll do anything, you know? You might get some resistance if you move the bingo date around or whatever, or you impede on what they've normally done. But mostly if you explain to it. So when we have these rock concerts for the neighborhood, my Polish panis, the old ladies, show up. I'm like, what are you doing here? You're not going to like the music, but they want to be a part of it. If we're doing something that's going to support the parish and grow the parish, they show up,
Hmm.
and a lot of our elderly do. Um, so I think it's a question of having that heart to heart kind of come to Jesus meeting that we've got to do something if we want to succeed as a parish, right? And they see it. I mean, they see that, so you're right. The big donors and the big supporters of the parish and the people who are doing a lot of the work are in their 70s and 80s. What's going to happen when they go?
Right,
Well,
Rick, I saw you starting to get a little choked up there for a second. Was there something in particular you were thinking about as you were
No,
talking?
it's just for so many parents,
mhm,
that's the heartache.
Mhm.
They blame themselves.
mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
Parents blame themselves. Like, what did I do wrong?
Right.
It's like you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, we clergy may have done more wrong than, like
Mhm.
Mhm.
their kids. It's not they're anti-church. There's no connection to church,
Right.
right? It's like they've written it off completely. So for people whose lives were centered on the Eucharist, then to see that, they're like, oh, you know, it's very hard. So for me, as a pastor, to help them understand, well, got to be patient. And then the flip side is equally painful, is when those people pass and the kids don't know what to do with the funeral. And they're like, I'm not sure I believe in any of this anymore, but I got to do what's right by my mom and dad.
Mhm.
Those are actually, bar none, the most powerful moments for evangelization. If you can do funerals right, I've gotten more people back to church through funerals than any program we've
Mm.
done.
Totally.
You
Completely
know?
agree.
Wow.
Oh
Completely
yeah,
agree. Yeah.
that is a place we need to invest. It's worth taking the time to sit down and talk to people.
Obviously, without using names, is there a story that comes to mind for someone
Oh,
who?
I mean, multiple stories of people who one of the parents dies and they come and you accept them the way they are, and you don't judge them, and you're kind and gentle, and then you preside at a liturgy that is decent, and the homily isn't just chat GPT generated nothing. It's it's personal, and like, we don't do eulogies, but you can talk about the person, and you can
Hmm.
and 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 acknowledge their pain, and acknowledge their feelings, and acknowledge their doubts. And I've had multiple in Toronto and Syracuse here now,
Mhm.
people who have come back and said, I think I want to go start coming back to church. I feel like I belong here.
Mhm.
Like
They're
I can be
finding the
accepted.
connection during a period where they really need support in the first
They're
place.
vulnerable. Weddings are the opposite. Weddings are hell, right? Because everybody's so freaking stressed that they don't have time
Yeah.
to
Yeah, I totally agree. As someone who has, we had a COVID wedding, my wife and I, and so it was like planning and replanning and replanning. And it was by the time we got to have our reception a year later, it was like I was more looking forward to it being over than I was like actually having the party. It was, but no offense, Father John, who gave
Yeah.
us the
No.
blessing that day.
No, it's not offense at all. I mean, there's just so many things to kind of to think about with this one. Like the personalization aspect, which is clearly possible at a funeral and is also possible at a wedding. I mean, especially I look at the weddings I do now, they're all personal ones. I mean, I'm not at a parish, so and there's a certain impact there. The thing that I find to be like I don't know if I'm gonna say the frustrating aspect of it is just like you can have this amazing personal type of experience in the context of a funeral or a wedding, but there's not really a follow-up that will be able to match that type of personal experience. So, you can have this great moment of like being able to like, oh my gosh, what is the meaning of life? And then you go to the church the following Sunday, it's some other priest who and is like saying something, and you're like, I don't like, where's the connection there, right? I mean, this is the constant thing that I'm struggling with my high school students. I'm like, I can't guarantee if I'm working with them that that in any time I should say, yeah, you should try going to church, because I don't know what I'm sending them to. Like, that's like that's the challenge, right? Not everyone's on the same page, not everyone has the same attitude, and there will never be a time where that will be different. That's it's not going to be like everyone's going to like get the same memo and follow it, so to speak, the same playbook, and follow all the plays the same way. But so that's one thing I'm just thinking of. But also, and I want to talk about something very practical, and especially for you as a pastor at a church. Now, I've always had this grand vision, uh, and I think you would understand this because of some of the things that you're doing at your parish, to make an actual church building more multi-purposeful. I look at the great cathedrals in Europe, and when they were built to serve lots of different purposes, not just the liturgical celebration, which is the reason why they don't have pews. And the pews were really a Protestant thing because there was so much more sitting and listening to the word that they became more stationary parts of the church building. I mean, what would it look like to remove pews from a church, to have very nice, comfortable chairs that you would be able to use in the context of liturgy, but to be able to have a little bit more flex with the space? Like, what could that possibly look like? Could that be done? Could there be more arts and music being done in that space? I mean, I know that it's a challenge to think this way, especially because you feel as if you're doing so many things to disrespect the intention of why and how the church was built when it was built. But is that something that we could be open to, especially in the neighborhoods of urban areas? Um, I'm just curious about that. So I guess I have two things to kind of talk about, like that one idea there of like, yeah, powerful funeral, really not an adequate follow up, and like infrastructure and really structure itself. How could it be modified to address the needs today? And let me just end this with one thing, because the thing that people are always in thinking now, it's like we got to repopulate the church. We got to bring more people into these churches, but they were built at a time when people wanted to go to church, and they use their nickels and dimes to build the actual church, and then they populated it. So like that's not what people are necessarily looking to do. They're not spending their time and their money in order to kind of build that or create that. So is there a different way of looking at this now to try to respond directly to what people want or what they're looking for?
Well, let me
I
let me
gave you, I
tackle,
know, I know I gave you a lot. I'm sorry.
let me tackle that last piece about the buildings themselves. I come from the Church of Quebec, which experienced um, what we call the Quiet Revolution in the 60s and 70s, where we went from um, probably one of the most Catholic societies in the world with the most churches in any city, um, and where the clergy really dominated people's lives, and I don't mean dominated just, I mean really was overbearing on people. To now, it's completely secularized. It's the porn capital of North America, Montreal. Um, there's very little connection to that, right? And in the 60s and 70s, when I was growing up, I mean, all of our churches became, we stopped building churches very early on, and we started using gyms and multi-purpose spaces. And a lot of our parishes are multi-purpose places, and it's really not helped. It's not worked, at least from what I can see. And being here, I mean, reading, if you read the Barna Group, some of the research around what young adults are looking for, it's a very strange beast, right? They want the trappings of traditional Catholicism. They want the sacred space.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is the young adults like the sacredness, like the transcendence. They don't want to. They don't want to play cards in that room. They
Mm-hmm.
want to be their
Mm-hmm.
church because they're also thinking this is where I'm going to get married. This is where I'm going to have my funeral. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but they want it to be uh, fresh and inclusive and welcoming and kind and different. So the messaging needs to be updated. But my experience is that young people are not looking for a different kind of space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we tried that. Our guys tried that in Brooklyn. So when we went to when we were at the San Damiano mission, um, I'm not going to get into the whole politics of it, but there was supposed to be more spaces available to the friars to do stuff, and there wasn't. They only
Mm-hmm.
had the church to work with. So they were trying to build community among the young adults. So they had a Friendsgiving dinner in the church, in the main aisle. They put a long table, and I was not there, but I've seen the pictures and I've heard people talk about it. It was probably one of the most powerful things they've experienced, right? But I guess some clergy in the area were really uncomfortable with a meal being offered in church, which is kind of
Imagine
fun,
that. Isn't that I said this one time to a priest friend of mine. I was like, it kind of bums me out the way that we do. Like, I'm not, there's nothing about the Eucharist that bums me out, but the way that we celebrate a meal doesn't feel anything like a meal. And I said this to him, and he's like, when I look around at the altar, I see all of you gathered around at the table. I'm like, well, that's great. I see one person at the table from my perspective. Like this, it's a very priest centric idea that like we're all gathered around the table. You know,
What was that movie that came out? Oh my God, the way you just said that, that movie that came out that was supposed to revolutionize vocations. I don't know who produced it, but it was like it came out. I don't know if it was Lights of Columbus or somebody came up with a movie, and it was very dramatic and incense, and the priest offering the mass. I don't know if it was Mike Schmitz or somebody, but the host is going up and everything. And I'm looking at it going, there's nobody else there. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the priest by himself,
right,
right?
right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it was a kind of a Superman version of the priesthood, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's you when you're sitting in the pews, it's a different view of what the
Yeah.
mass is like.
And I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I'm not a liturgist or anything else, and I don't have all the knowledge around why the church decided to kind of like, even though the Eucharist was instituted in the context of a meal, we take it out of the context of a meal. I don't know. I don't know those things, but I do think it's strange because I think it would be lovely to celebrate the Eucharist in the context of an actual meal with people that who you are conversing with, and it's not, and I feel like
And people you don't know, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's the
it's
whole
that's right, that's right,
challenge of the
yeah,
gospel, bring the people in.
absolutely,
Um, but yeah, it's again, and it goes back to the first point you raised, John, about the follow up with the funerals or the weddings or whatever. And this is the part that's hard, right? It's And this is where the technology that we have at our disposal might be helpful. It's like, okay, I've done these weddings this last 6 months. How am I going to follow up with this couple? Hey, how's it going? Do you want to come for coffee? Do you want to get together? A lot of the people, and this for priests, it's hard because they just want their wedding. They really don't want a relationship with the church.
Right.
Catholic wedding. They've moved on, but some don't, and some are like, and I've done this, right? And actually they're the ones who usually initiate it, but it's like, hey, can we come and see you? And we enjoyed talking to you when we were doing marriage prep. Let's go for coffee. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, and then
Hmm.
and then they start coming to church, and it's like
Yeah.
they become more regular.
That
It's a
is the right way to
relationship.
do this. In my experience, more churches are like require you to be going there for a year before you can have a wedding there than don't. And instead of it being a conversation about, oh, where are you in all of this? Because let's be honest, there's still a lot of people who want a Catholic wedding, or maybe their parents want a Catholic wedding and they're paying for it. So they have to, whatever it is, where that might be a real moment to meet someone, in their faith journey. And it totally isn't treated that way. It's like, well, did you follow the rules? It's always behave first.
This is exactly what happened today through our website. We got a request for marriage. Somebody wants to get married, and it's like, I'm Catholic. My fiance is not. We go to his Protestant church, but we want to be married in the Catholic church.
Hmm.
But they don't come to. I mean, they don't live here. They're in a different part of Brooklyn. They go to a Protestant church.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I say? Right? Do I say, okay, come on over and talk, or do I preempt it and say, if you're not coming to our church and you don't live in this neighborhood, why are you talking to me?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But that could put them off,
Yeah. I mean, start with a conversation, welcome them in first, right? It has to be, has to
right?
be.
But that
They have to know they belong there before anything else.
but that costs you. As a
Mm-hmm.
minister, that costs you because and I'm not saying I'm not gonna, I'm probably that's what I'm gonna do,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, okay, I'm gonna put myself out there and have this conversation, this effort, and they might just try to bamboozle me or just like, oh yeah, yeah, whatever, yeah, we'd like
Mm-hmm.
to. It's it's very disheartening for
Mm-hmm.
priests, I think. It is
Mm-hmm.
for me sometimes. I'm
So what is the concern? What might they do?
just do whatever. They'll jump the hoops and they'll say what I want to hear to get married, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
really gonna be invested in the process.
Mm-hmm. But we don't know how the Holy Spirit's going to work in their lives. Is that the worst thing, right? For them to have that Catholic marriage that they wanted to have in the place they wanted to have it, like they didn't receive the resistance that they might have received in some other. Who knows? You might not have been the first choice, by the way.
How dare you?
I'm sorry to say, but like the
No.
reality, they might have experienced what my wife and I experienced, where we got a couple and no, you're not in this neighborhood, you're not in this town, whatever it
Yeah,
was.
I just, yeah, the poor Chancery, the Chancery is being very, very, very kind to me because I have a lot of these strange weddings that show up, and I try to be as helpful as possible because I don't want one more story to go out there of the priest was mean or the church was mean or was not welcoming. Like, of course, I will keep doing this. I will keep being generous and welcoming and hospitable as best we can.
Yeah.
And
And not
it's
just for the publicity, for the lives of those people that you're
That's
talking
what I
to.
mean, because you don't know how to touch them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How it might. Oh, this was really kind of nice. Maybe we need to talk some more.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, I mean, I don't shy away from that, from encouraging people to grow in their faith.
Because that itself is an act of evangelization, I would
Oh
say.
yeah, oh yeah,
Especially if they are, you know, for whatever reason, going to Protestant, church with the groom, the fiance. I mean, we don't know why, but who knows what he expects to receive from the Catholic Church, right? And this might be a chance to, change that expectation for the
yeah.
first time.
I had so like I said, nobody in my family goes to church. My father was like a daily mass communicant, and my mother went on Wednesdays for a variety of reasons. But nobody else in my family goes except one of my cousins. But anyways, but in French they call me le curé du village, the village curate, the village priest, because I'm the priest in the family. So one of my extended by marriage family members' fathers died. They said, "Could you come and do a funeral?" I'm like, "Of course, do whatever you want." Well, he didn't practice the faith. It's going to be in the funeral home. Could you make it not too religious? And I'm like, okay. So I show up and I wore my habit and I said, listen, I'm happy to be here with you and to help you process this and to pray. But I said, I can't be somebody I'm not. All I have to offer you is Jesus, right? And that's really what I believe, and this is what I can share with you. Now, these are all people who are involved, very heavily involved in the Montreal video industry, video games. So I used the TV show um, Halo, no Halo,
Halo. Yeah.
Halo, and and John Reacher, is it John, is that the sergeant? Well, anyways, the main character, his tag is John 3:17 or something, which is actually an interesting Bible verse. So I kind of wove it into that and just threw it at them, and hopefully, and they were like stunned, right? And I think it raised some questions. Now, will anything come of it? I don't know,
Mhm.
but I could have just said, you know what, none of you go to church. Why
Yeah.
would I? Why would I
You
do
know,
this?
and that point that you just made about how none of us know what happens, like I myself need to stop obsessing about this stuff. As I come from a marketing background where your job is to measure everything, because if you're not measuring, you don't know what worked, and if you didn't know what worked, then why'd you do something? Why'd you even try something in the first place? And it's not that no one knows if something worked. It's that it's for God to know if this worked sometimes, and it doesn't necessarily have to be me, or you in this case, delivering that homily. This is a first of all, it's a qualitative thing. It's not a quantitative thing, and it is and you're this isn't your work. You're doing the Lord's work, and it's for Him to know if it works. It's for Him to continue to use, as you sort of try to till the soil.
Yeah. Uh, As we were saying earlier, I mean, it does become taxing on the clergy, and I think part of that is because we have so much of our identity caught up in success. I could say we're just men, but men we tend to be successful. We like to be successful, and we like to have accomplishments. I joke around with people and say that's why priests love to build things and renovate things. Because it's a tangible sign that I did something here. I accomplished something versus helping people come to know Jesus. That's so much more intangible.
100%.
You
This is why small group work is so important. Small group work happens on the inside. This is stuff that only a few people are invited to, and it's the same people every time. And there isn't optics for it, right? Other people outside of that community are not even going to know what's going on. But that's really rich growth stuff that's happening there versus, kind of an unstrategic one-off big event that looks huge, looks like we got lots of people at, but actually, it's just a blip in the kind of faith journey. I'm not saying that those don't matter too, and they might really be helpful in the context of a larger sort of thing that's happening, some sort of um, idea that's being developed in the lives of these people. But a lot of the time, that's not the case, the idea was to just get the numbers so that we can say we got the numbers, and that's just not where we need to focus our efforts these days.
Well, yeah, because as we began this conversation, part of what we're trying to do is help people to grow along their path, and you can't do that at mega events, right? It's got to be a place where they're going to be vulnerable and share their path and share their journey, and be comforted and healed, but also challenged occasionally. Um, and maybe you can help me with this because that's one of the things I find very challenging. So when we came here, the my parochial vicar and I 2 years ago, our last mass, 12:30 p.m. There were not a lot of people there, like to the point where like, why are we doing this mass? Often we have kids from the religious education who come to that with their parents after their religious ed, but even that, it was not a lot of people. So over the last 2 years, we're seeing a pretty decent increase, mainly from young adults. Okay, so a lot of young adult couples, single men, single women. And I'm like, okay, like very noticeably to the point where this is going to become a bigger mass than the earlier English mass. We try to offer things for young adults, young men's Bible study, faith sharing, whatever events. A lot of the young adults don't want to do that stuff. They just want to come to mass. And one person said, "I don't need you for my social life."
That's
Okay.
exactly what we found in our study. Only like 63%, I think, of mass attending Catholics have a desire to are currently in any kind of faith group. They're not that's not what they are seeking generally. I thought it was a surprisingly low number, given these people are the people who still go to mass. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly it. It's like these are, and then, when they come for confession or they come for something else, they're pretty devout people, and it's the whole spectrum, right? From more liberal to more conservative, but they have a profound faith and a profound sense of God and their spirituality. But there's a certain, I don't know what to say, anonymity or privacy, but they leave that church faster than I do. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not out of the church and they're gone already.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Do you think that that's a sign that they're just kind of punching in and punching out and then going about their kind of everyday lives that really their faith doesn't inform, or is it something else going on?
I don't know. Talking to a lot of them, I don't think it's, if you mean punching out like a duty thing, that's
Yeah, I'm
disconnected.
Catholic, so I go to church, and that's a Sunday thing, type of. But the rest of the week, I'm just who I am. Doesn't really matter that I'm Catholic because I'm not going to church those days.
I don't think so. I don't get that sense, but I don't know. I don't have evidence of that.
Yeah, I would not think that's what it is. I don't I know exactly the type of person you're kind of referring to, Rick. I mean, it's almost akin to the fact like if you had like a gym membership. It's like, okay, I'm in here to do this. I'm gonna because I need this done because this is gonna make me feel better in whatever way possible for the rest of my week. So I clock in to do it because I can see the results and the necessity for this, and then I leave. It's not out of obligation, whether it's like, well, I need to do this because I was told by my parents long ago that I have to keep on going to church. Like
Right.
there's not that sense of obligation. So they have somehow realized like this is something important that I need to do because it actually helps me. Just like going to the gym helps me. So they at least they see some type of effect from it. But it's not in the way that they would think that somehow now the actual church community becomes their community, that they're participating in all these different things. I've said this before, like we're always intrinsically communal people. The thing that we're just kind of tackling with in our time is that most people do community on their terms. And that's kind of just another example of this. Like I need the church for the sacraments. I need to be part of that group of people going to that mass for that hour. So that's what I take from this experience because I know I need that, and then I can go on my way. So when you have community that's not on your own terms, there's a certain type of vulnerability that's required to actually enter into a space where you feel accepted, but you also know darn well that all these other people have been accepted for all these other various reasons and are very different than me. So I'm going to be in a space with lots of different people who may irk me, but they've all been accepted to this place. Like we have very few examples of things like that, other than say like a 12-step program, maybe. It's like that might be the best example of something where, okay, it doesn't matter if I'm conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, if I whatever gender I identify with, like it, we're all welcome here. Um, but because of that, we all now have to rub shoulders with people that we would not typically want to be with if we were able to define the community on our terms. There's enough tribes, there's enough echo chambers, there's enough bubbles that we are all in, but there's not this other type of space that's completely accepting and also kind of pushes people to encounter people different than themselves.
which is by design because that's uncomfortable. Who's going to go out of their way to create that space?
I mean, I often think about the great conversion stories. I mean, Dorothy Day. I mean, here she comes into St. Joseph's Church down in the village, stumbling in a 5:30 mass after drinking all night long at the bar, and she's just kind of taken by the fact that, like, how is it possible that people who are dressed in suits and also people who are dressed in like rags are in the same space together, and they're somehow welcomed in this space, or they're allowed, if anything, they're allowed to be in this space, you know. And that was very mind-boggling for her. How's that possible?
Yeah, and I'm literally picturing people that come to our church, and anytime I've had a need to sit down and talk to them, or they've needed to talk, and it's like profound spirituality, and but that communal dimension is that's not where they're finding their community. It's maybe too diverse, or eh, and I don't want to throw social media or internet under the bus, like, okay, that's the source of all of our problems, Facebook and Reels and stuff. But um, we entertain ourselves differently nowadays.
Mhm. When you say community, what do you mean?
Well, a sense of belonging, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the sense of a place where I can go beyond just mass on Sunday.
Yeah. I
And
asked that, especially you brought up social media,
yeah,
that I feel like the word itself is transforming before our eyes into something that I don't really recognize as community. Literally a person who does social for a company is called a community manager. And people who have a YouTube following call that their community. They might have the comments turned off, but somehow all these people who are watching the same video are in a community together, at least according to that person, even though they have no interaction with one another.
yeah.
And so that's what I'm wondering about when we talk about community. And what do we really mean? Because like they might find belonging because the host of that video show uh, makes them feel like they belong there. But if they're not finding connection with others, I wouldn't call it authentic community. And
Great.
especially if they're not um, kind of invested in something that's ongoing.
Well, as a person who lives community for a living, I mean, that's the heart of the friar, the life of the friar. Um, yeah, unless you're rubbing shoulders, we used to sort of sometimes make fun of, I hate to say this in public, but some of the sisters communities who used to say, oh, we have community, we get together once a month for dinner. I was like, well, okay, that's not community, like unless you're following the next person into the bathroom that they've, stunk up, or eating the food they prepared that's really not very good, or putting up with their crankiness like in a day to day, and the rubbing of shoulders, and learning to love people through that, and watching your own sharp edges being smoothed out. Uh, I don't know if that's community.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you help people move? Or do you like, and that's the other thing, and especially in New York City, for us here, we have so many people who know they're not going to be here forever, right? They're,
Yeah.
they're here for a time. And so how invested do they want to be? Like, I have a young man who helps me a lot in the parish, and he's like, he's going to get married. He's like, well, once we start having kids, I don't know where we're going to go. I'm like, gosh, like, like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
lots of kids in the neighborhood. You
yeah.
can have kids in New York City. Brooklyn is a great place to raise kids. You don't need to leave.
So then the people, are they getting it somewhere else? Are they getting all those things that you described in your community somewhere else outside of church? Or are they
I
just not getting it at all? That's just
I
not.
don't think they are. I mean, I think they have their friend circles, you know. Yes, in the sense of, I shouldn't say that. They're not getting the church type of communities at all, where it's very diverse. Um, they have their circle of friends, and that's it.
Mhm. But
I,
are
I,
they
I
are they smoothing each other's shoulders? Are they doing all those things that your community does? Are they going into the bathroom after each other?
Yeah.
I
They'd
really
have
like that one. I was like, wow, that really kind of puts a new spin on smelling like the sheep, you know.
yeah, Jesus, totally. Oh, I don't know. I hear the stories, and especially again in Brooklyn or New York City, I'm learning that you have to look beyond the surface, right? Because many of my parishioners, the lovely people here, they all look fantastic. They've got great lives and everything. Then when you scratch the surface, it's like there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of marital stuff. There's a lot of financial. Living in New York City is very difficult for people.
Oh
It's very
yeah.
expensive, and a lot of them struggle, and you don't see that. So um, peeling away the layers, a place where you can peel away the layers and be yourself. Yeah, I don't know if people do that or if it's all more superficial, in their social lives.
I think the thing I'm just gonna give a comment is that I don't think that we have been able to convince people that that's somehow a good thing for them to do, to rub shoulders with people that they may not want to rub shoulders with, for the sole purpose that you will understand more about who you are and what you're meant to do in that context of that. Like that's where your singular unique vocation emerges from when you're in those types of uncomfortable places. Uh, I don't know if we've really, so to speak, sold people on that idea. So I think we're trying to make people so comfortable at the expense of like, well, how you come out of yourself is by actually entering into places that are uncomfortable. And so that's like a very difficult thing to try to navigate. We want to be so loving and accepting and making people so comfortable, but if we leave you there, then you're not going to know who you are. You're not going to know whose you are, and you're not really going to understand your vocation
Yes.
uh, unless you are actually going to be thrown into places where you're uncomfortable. So I'm here to help you to be comfortable going into places of uncomfort. That's basically maybe the trajectory, you know.
I think you're onto something there, John. I think that's the story of this nation actually at this moment, right? We like to be in our bubbles and not to engage the other, and we might say that's probably that's the original sin, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
the other. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's probably part of what we need to do in this process of evangelization is helping people to not just connect with the Lord and with the community, the faith community, but to see themselves as engaging with people different than themselves and willing to be uncomfortable at times.
Religion to Reality is an initiative of DeSales Media created by me, Dave Plisky, and is produced and edited by Connor Donnelly. If you found value in our conversation, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you love the show, ratings and reviews go a long way toward letting others know about the show. Go to religiontoreality.org for more details and resources.